1997. But I had become convinced that it was true from my having seen the photographs in the classified portions of Blue Book.
Henry, Herbals Biomind. Introducing the ultimate cognitive enhancement solution, Biomind. Today's video is exclusively brought to you by our sponsor, Adentia Herbals. Unlock your brain's full potential with a powerful blend of 9 meticulously selected plants and mushrooms, each backed by peer-reviewed research for their cognitive boosting benefits and safety. Adentia Herbals formula combines organic full-spectrum powders and potent standardized extracts, ensuring that you receive the optimal concentration of each ingredient's cognitive enhancing compound, carefully selecting the most desirable parts of each plant and mushroom to create a harmonious blend that supports your mental clarity and focus. But that's not all. They infuse each bottle with personal intention of improving the lives, the minds, and overall greatness of each of their customers. Because of their commitment to your well-being every step of the way, you're going to get an exclusive 25% off your order via www.adentiaherbals.com using our code TOTALDISCLOSURE at checkout. All the links will be in the description or on the screen.
So I began an investigation to determine what it is that was really going on. And because of that, I ended up getting retained by Dr. John Mack, at Harvard, who had written a book basically about a number of his major interviews with high-ranking military officials, law enforcement officers, others who had had these direct, close encounters with UFOs. And he had attempted to write an article for the New England Journal of Medicine about this extraordinary group of people who certainly was no career builder inside the military to report that you'd encountered a UFO. But the bottom line is that I ended up representing Dr. John Mack in his confrontation with the Harvard faculty that occurred in 1994. And in that context, I got introduced to basically all of the major players in the whole field of UFO studies. And I got to meet Bud Hopkins. I got to meet, virtually everybody. Dave Jacobs. I got to meet Stanton Friedman. I got to meet, all the people that were involved. And Linda Moulton Howe and Stephen Greer and and all of the rest of the people. And so I started because I was preparing witnesses to present at Harvard University in kind of a grand rounds to this special faculty committee that got put together to basically excoriate Dr. John Mack for his having written this book. They thought that this was actually, undermining the credibility of Harvard University to have one of their major, the chairman of their clinical psychiatry department, be talking publicly about it. And so the bottom line is I ended up getting to meet everybody and interview everybody and became legal counsel for the Project for Extraordinary Experience Research. And I got fully involved professionally in this.
And not only were you getting to talk to people like Stanton Friedman and, everybody, Jacques Vallée, you were getting
Wendell Stevens,
all of them. But you were getting to speak to them as as a capacity as an attorney.
That's right.
There's this different aspect there. And with the compelling evidence, that you've seen, I mean, you're a secondhand witness to a degree yourself. You've seen what you deem as absolutely credible evidence that there are crash retrieval programs. And I know that you've been involved with people like Lou Elizondo and the Disclosure Project with Dr. Greer.
Yes.
I think you've covered enough of that where we don't have to dive too much deeper into it. If I hear one more person ask you when Lou's book is coming out, I'm going to roll my head. It'll come out when it comes out, everybody. It'll come out when it comes out. But I do want to talk to you about some of the things that you've discussed about, say, the galactic, is there such thing? It was a Reddit question that was actually submitted, and I wanted to read a couple of them because there were some of them were really, really good. So we'll start with this one by Surgeon of Steel 419, and if you could prioritize the phenomena down to three main facts, what would they be?
Well, I guess the most important fundamental fact is that we have now, just recently, our human scientific community, just in the last 20 years, basically, have finally come to acknowledge that planets actually exist outside of our solar system. That's a huge Rubicon that they've crossed now. That they would never acknowledge. They were being dominated by the scientific, logical, positivist, materialist worldview. And until they actually saw them and could actually basically photograph them and deal, they weren't willing to acknowledge they even existed. So that's an extraordinarily important thing that's happened in just the last 25 years or so.
Right.
Secondly, they've now come to realize that there are vastly more stars in our Milky Way galaxy than they had thought, and that there are vastly more galaxies in our universe than they had previously thought. And this is now because of the Hubble, the Planck telescope, and more especially the James Webb telescope is up now. And so that you're starting to get acknowledgments that it's absolutely impossible, it's ridiculous for people to continue to insist that the likelihood of life elsewhere in the universe is problematic, and so that those two sets of things are extraordinarily important. And now that, very importantly, thirdly, you have extraordinarily high level of military officials, intelligence officials inside the United States government that are coming forward. And they're providing first-hand and second-hand direct information about the existence of a long-standing crash retrieval, UFO crash retrieval program that has been going on now for decades, and the assertion that they have actually recovered more than one extraterrestrial, non-human origin spacecraft, and that they've recovered bodies in connection with these spacecraft that they've tested and have determined that they are non-human occupants of these spacecraft. Now it should be a total headline in the front page of the New York Times, but the bottom line is, because there's been such an aggressive program that has been mounted by an element deep within the national security state of our country to keep this secret, and they've mounted this aggressive campaign to embarrass, attack, undermine, ridicule anybody who would suggest that this is true, that it's still difficult to get a lot of the mainline institutions to come forward and fully acknowledge that this is what's happening. But this is where we are now, that it's absolutely obvious now that not only has our government, an element deep within the national security state, been actively involved in attempting to retrieve UFOs if they fall down from the sky, but there appears to be evidence, growing evidence, that there's been an active campaign to try to bring them down so that they can get their hands on them, because they want to get a hold of the technology.
That's what I was going to say.
That's right.
That they. So do you really quickly, just a side note, really quickly, do you believe that they are using some form of direct energy weapon to possibly bring these down?
I have to be extremely careful here, because I don't want to speculate about this.
Right, it is hard to speculate in that degree.
There's growing indications that need to be pursued to determine whether or not we've crossed that line, where rather than just retrieving them, if for some happenstance that they happen to have crashed, if they're engaged in kind of a more aggressive program to try to bring these things down, that is of such extraordinary additional importance that I need to be extremely careful about asserting things until we get more evidence on that.
Absolutely, and that completely makes sense. So, yeah, definitely finish up with what you were saying. I'm sorry.
Well, no,
Okay. So directed energy weapons are, I think, just they're becoming more in the vernacular. And I know you can't say it, but even things like Havana syndrome have been now talked about in the National Security Council. And there's a little bit, Dr. Gary Nolan's work. I'm sure you've talked to him. It's something that we are growing, turning our attention to as a society. I hope, and I think it's coming with the UFO phenomenon as a package deal. But I want to talk to you about you speak about these non-human intelligence, various 5 specifically,
yes.
with very much conviction. Is there a degree of some sort of galactic federation? Sorry, a car alarm was just going off. But do you know if there's any coordination between these 5 races, and that is one is dominant and yada yada yada? Because I think you talk about this.
Well, it's an extremely interesting question. I know, Ty, that based upon some of my direct face-to-face interviews with people who I find to be extraordinarily credible, in that I would be convinced that if I were to present them in front of a jury, which is what I do, and have done over the last 50 years. I've done trials in 23 different states, in dealing with other dimensions of legal issues, all the way from the Wounded Knee occupation to, Iran-Contra and Karen Sokol case and others that people know about. And I know that if I select witnesses whom I'm convinced, if I place them in front of a jury and subjected them to direct examination and exposed them to any thoroughgoing cross-examination that anyone might be able to mount against them, that they would convince a jury that they were telling the truth, and that they have given me accounts of, for example, Barbara Lamb, who is an extraordinarily credible person, a woman who's like just now 90 years old,
right.
who has been interviewing people who hold sincere beliefs that they've had encounters, face-to-face encounters with UFOs and the occupants, and have described them to her in some detail. And she actually recounted to me that we are now in possession of audio recordings of her interviews of these people. She has now left these with us at the New Paradigm Institute so that we can protect these things for the future. So we've been able to hear the detailed descriptions of people of having face-to-face encounters with the beings. And Barbara Lamb herself has told me the story that she was, after years and years of interviewing all these people, she had never actually had a direct encounter with the UFO or any extraterrestrial beings. And so that she was kind of longing to get to have such an experience. And one afternoon, she came into her house, her apartment, from being out in the garden, and here was a UFO person standing right in the middle of her living room. It was a reptilian, over 6 feet tall, almost 7 feet tall, extraordinarily benign, very, very friendly, and positive being, just telepathically communicated to her. Look, you had always wanted to confirm that we were real, and so we wanted to make sure that you were affirmed in your knowledge of it. And she sat right there and told me the story, and described the being. And it wasn't any question. This wasn't a person. This wasn't a human being. This was a humanoid reptilian, almost between 6 and 7 feet tall, totally benign. And she described the being to me. And I had another interview with a fellow who was on his deathbed, Albert Stein, his name was. He was a clerk typist for Project Blue Book for decades. And he ended up actually going with his commander of Project Blue Book, the top secret portion of Project Blue Book, to S4, and was actually present during an interview of a live